Chad Parenteau is my guest, and I'm glad you can come. I know it's been very busy at work for you and all.
Pleased to be here.
Chad Parenteau is an award-winning area poet with publication credits in the Beacon Street Review, Fledgling, Meanie, which was a great magazine. Too bad it's not here. Jim Burrell started is in New York, isn't he?
He is in New York. He's still doing the Can We Have Our Ball Back website.
You're on that also. That's a good magazine. Can We Have Our Ball Back, Emerson Street, and Somerville News, the Lyrical Somerville that comes out on the Somerville News. And he has an MFA in writing from Emerson College. And a poem from his book, Self-Portrait and Fire, first in a series, won a Cambridge Poetry Awards a few years back. And he's with us here today, and we're glad. And both of our good friend Lynne Sticklor, who happens to be a editor and designer for the Emerson Street Press. We share that mutual friend, so it's a small world. We met
actually at Out of the Blue gathering for the weekend of 4th of July. I wasn't in very much of a celebratory mood that weekend, with national politics being what they are and my leanings being what they are. I didn't feel like going anywhere. I didn't feel like celebrating. On a whim, I went to Out of the Blue, met Lynne Sticklor, who at the time was promoting Lo Gallucco's book Hot Rain.
Galluccio,
sorry. Sorry, Lo. But at the time, she was just showing out brand new copies of that. We ended up talking. She enjoyed my book. She bought my book, which I always appreciate.
That's always good.
It's kind of funny. My last girlfriend, Bahor, actually bought my book, too.
There you go. You're a sucker.
I'm very stingy these days. But we ended up meeting. She appreciated the artist of my book, James Conant, and to this day, we're still trying to get James Conant involved in other things. One thing led to another, and we're actually seeing each other, and she's not as we speak, but currently looking over a larger collection I'm trying to put together for various.
And she has her own press now.
Yes,
with
Victor Cayro.
Victor Cayro.
Victor Cayro, Cosmic Orange Press.
Right. And so we've all sort of this spawning ground for all this stuff. Is all of us is the Out of the Blue Gallery, where a lot of artists and poets congregate, network, meet, and it's like a huge extended family. You know,
it's been a lot of fun, and just even getting my start at Stone Soup.
Yeah.
It wasn't the very first place I read. That was actually at the, I don't think it's there anymore, the Cafe Song and Tea Gallery in East Bridgewater. That's where I first got started, but Stone Soup was really one place.
And many people have started there, yeah. From the greats to the...
Really nice place to get your to stretch your legs. If you're an amateur, they accept you. If you're a pro, they accept you. You get exactly what you put out of it in a venue like that.
Right, and they're not cruel, or they're judging you about 1 to 10 or whatever, the stuff like that. Chad, now, do you feel there is an underground poetry scene here, and if so, how would you define it, and are you part of it?
Well, see, I thought you were going to ask questions about me being part of the spoken or the slam scene or the page scene, the page or stage scene.
Well, I want to throw you off. We don't want you to be perfect.
But it's kind of weird because I don't see myself as being part of any scene. But I would say definitely yes. There's of course there's definitely a great underground scene. Very fragmented though. I think the best is yet to come, even in light of Cosmic Orange, Lynne's press, your press, and just everything else going around here. There's just a lot of things flying around, and there seems to be very little cohesion. I think that's just a step away when certain players come up, and it might be you in 5 years, it might even be Lynne in 5 years, but it's just, I really think that something's just got to come out and surprise everyone, because poetry, I think, is really coming back as a form. I can even see that just in my small involvement with some presses that just take poetry peripherally, like What's Up Magazine, which we were talking about earlier. Poetry is one of the very few things that you don't need to they don't really expect you to write by community. The article that I was talking about in What's Up, I think that went through, I think, a dozen changes just between myself and 2 other editors. The poetry, the only changes that were actually done were by me absolutely last minute. And that's an amazing lot of freedom. There's also a lot of ways poets who don't try can abuse that, but just the potential of maybe having one of the last possible venues, maybe one of the last 2, where you can just basically be relatively unwatched and be able to say what you want, but the only challenge there is just trying to find the audience. But you're coming from a very pure standpoint.
Well, you know, and this isn't anything new. In the 60s, there was the mimeograph revolution where people were just stapling things together, and then they went on. A lot of people started out there, and then they became major poets, and these presses are now archived. And so, I mean, it is very necessary. I always view what I'm doing, you know, and I believe like I'm in AAA, you know, AAA ball, you know, and a lot of the talent comes up from AAA, and, you know, there would be no place for a lot of poets, you know, circulating at local venues if it wasn't for small presses and people who were willing to, you know, like Lynne and Victor and me and other people to publish these folks. And increasingly, as evidenced by the growing series we're having, Ibbotson and the Cafe Review, and you've been in the Ibbotson Street Press, the Cafe Review is showing that it is an important movement in the literary world, you know, which is becoming more and more, you know, conglomerates and things like that. But I'm preaching right now, and the question should be for you. But how do you define yourself as a poetry? I mean, maybe you don't like to be labeled, but I mean, if you...
A lot of my writing roots and a lot of my influences, if I had to say anything, put me on the spot, I'm certainly not a language poet like Jim Burley's crowd, so to speak. It's not really a crowd. It is
a group of people, you know.
He's his own man, though. And he was doing his own thing way before you could even categorize him as a language poet.
And he had both of us in, and we're not language poets.
Absolutely. Very, very all-inclusive. If you look at Ballback, just to go off on a slight tangent, I mean, you're included with the likes of Robert Pinsky, Franz Wright, a lot of his poems that were in...
And Lee Latif.
Yeah, a lot of his Franz Wright's poems that won the Pulitzer were actually in Ballback, too. I mean, that's amazing that online can do that. But getting back to how you would classify me, I was very much influenced by a lot of the confessional poets.
Sexton and...
Sexton, definitely. Transformations is one of my most favorite, even though it's not necessarily confessional, although she definitely does put herself into the modern fairy tales like Cinderella, all the Brothers Grimm stories. She definitely puts a big chunk of herself in there, and it works. Robert Lowell, Robert Lowell and Snodgrass were definitely eye-openers. And I do have to say, definitely to a good degree, Dr. Alan Feldman, who was my teacher as an undergrad at Framingham State. He's an amazing poet. He just came out with another book, A Sail to Great Island, and you don't hear very much from him, but he's been published everywhere. Some of his books, which are very easy to get online, even though they're not in print, they're Happy Genius and Anniversary. Those were two books that really opened the eye and were very accessible to
Alan
me.
Feldman.
Alan Feldman.
Okay, I got to keep that in mind.
Amazing work.
All right, now. You got your MFA at Emerson College, which is well-known for its writing program, although you told me at the time you were going there in the late 90s, it wasn't. And first of all, who did you study with? And how would you respond to folks constantly say this, that an MFA program is a factory, it's a waste of time, it's, you know, you learn the techniques, but I mean, you don't learn inspired writing. That's a big question. But first of all, who did you study under?
In the order in which I took classes with them, Gail Mazur,
who did run the Blacksmith poetry.
John Scoyles.
Okay.
Good poet in his own right. At the time he'd what's the one book I just read from him? His earliest one, A Little Faith, which I definitely recommend. I still have to read one of his newer ones, A Definition of the Soul. He was very helpful, and he was my first selection for thesis head, but he was too busy. This inadvertently brought me to meet Bill Knott for the first time.
Bill Knott.
I had never taken a class with him.
And you know what? It's funny about Bill Knott. I was over at the Lamont Library, and he puts out these self-published chapbooks. And he put this one out with all these bad reviews on the back and front. I mean, he has a sort of iconoclastic way about him, doesn't he?
You should see his office, or the office that was there when I was there. It was actually filled. His front door was actually just labeled with covers of out-of-print books, reviews, comments by people like Mark Strand. Mark Strand's one that comes to mind. Just basically saying Bill Noah's one of the best poets of the generation.
Yet he's one of the most unrecognized. I mean, in terms of, he's not. He doesn't have like a stature of Pinsky, although he says because he's not a promoter, maybe, or a sort of.
He's definitely very self-contained, and he's someone you can admire, because I think everyone would like to be self-contained and not have to resort to too much marketing, not too much going out. You'd like to be as self-contained as possible, just to sit back and write.
But it ain't, that's just the way it works.
For 9.5 out of 10 times, it just doesn't seem to be.
And even, I would say, let's say, and I think you might agree, you could be a mediocre poet with excellent media skills and be a great poet with lousy media skills, and the guy who's mediocre might even do better.
True. Yeah.